everyone, I'm Elaine Chow.
And I'm Trist Curlis.
And welcome to the Musician's Loop.
Loop, like a drum loop?
No, like the kind of thing that a jeweler uses to evaluate gems.
Oh, like a magnifying glass, like what we'll do on this podcast, actively listening to music like a musician.
That's right. And every week, we are choosing a track to dive into together and share our thoughts about what we find intriguing about the song.
Whether it's songwriting, chord progression, instrumentation, recording technology, arrangement, whatever, we're looking at the music we love through the lens, or the loop, of decades in the music industry.
Hey, Trist, what do we have this week?
Oh, we have a good one this week. This week we have a song from an artist who had 2 top 10 hits with the same song, almost 15 years apart.
Oh, okay. Tell me more about this.
And in typical Trist fashion, it doesn't really have anything to do with the song. I picked a different song, but we're going to listen to Neil Sedaka's When You Were Lovin Me.
Oh, okay.
Again, also in Trist fashion, there's the big hits that he had, and this was not one of them. But I do think it's pretty fascinating that he had 2 hits with this song, Breaking Up Is Hard to Do, kind of the doo-wop-y version of it in the 60s, and then in the late 70s, on the same album that You Were Lovin Me comes from. He redid it in kind of a loungy, slow ballad version. So it's cool to have hits in different decades, but with the same song. And as a songwriter, heck yeah, I can make even more money off of the same song. Good job, Neil Sedaka.
Love it. All right. So before we pause, can you remind our listeners how we're listening to music as a part of the Musician's Loop community?
Oh, yes, especially with this great record. There's some great players on this album, so you want to hear it as good as possible, listening in the best listening situation you can. As I always say, we appreciate that you're joining us from your walk, your run, your drive to the supermarket, whatever it is. Sometimes you can't really improve your listening situation, but if you happen to be in a position where you can take 5 seconds and grab the nicer headphones or put it on the good speakers or get in a quiet place in your home where you can listen to this music, that is the thing we're encouraging, even more than listening to us blabber on about it.
Awesome. So we're going to go ahead and leave links to the song in the show notes, and we'll be right back. All right. That was quite a trip. Holy cows.
Yeah, we like to mix it up here.
So tell me a little bit more about the song. Why did you choose the song?
You know, like so many, this is just a song I've always liked. I heard versions of this in different times in my life. I think my parents had this record when I was growing up because, again, they had some other hits on it. So this wasn't one of the hits, but I always liked this one with the different feel changes. It's kind of like 2 songs in one. I guess I always knew why the changes were there, but they've come more into focus now that I've taken the time to listen to it for this show.
Well, tell me a little bit more about these changes. It was definitely something that I noticed, and I have some thoughts about it, but I'm really interested in hearing where we're going to start out today.
I like the feel changes, especially when you're trying for a pop song. You're trying to have hits, which is probably why this wasn't a hit, but you're not doing these kind of changes that frequently. Every once in a while, you'll have the crazy 7-minute song that was a big hit that had 7 different field changes in it. It's just rarer that stuff happens. There's always formulaic kind of is where you get the hits. But now looking back, I love how the different feels happen. Like when it goes to the upbeat, it's like a flashback in the movie or in the TV show, the flashback to when they were together, how he's lamenting how they're not. But back then it was the happy. So instead of just mentioning, oh, remember that was a good time, that was really happy. No, he takes us there so we can experience how great it was. And then back to remembering, yeah, that was really cool. Don't you wish it was like that again? I wish it so much that here we are. It flashes back to another fun time when we were at the circus or whatever. I think the other thing that I like about it, it's the feeling and the sound and lots of the musical idioms of gospel music without being religious whatsoever. It's just a happy, fun time. But a lot of the sound obviously makes you think of like gospel church music. There's zero church or religious references whatsoever in the lyric, in the meaning, in the context. yet there's that feeling that he uses for the happiness to take us to the happy place. I find that interesting.
I also was listening to the two different themes, and one of the things I looked at was tempo, just trying to tap out, okay, where is this tempo? And so the first theme, this kind of like medium tempo, is about 68 beats per minute. So not too fast, not too slow. And then it went into what I just denoted like Black church experience, right? Like full of tambourine. It's got the choir going. It's got the call and response, which I felt like
Mm-hmm.
was a very, very like Black church slash gospel feel to it.
Mm-hmm.
And also a lot of horns, which I was like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay, interesting. Got the horns going on here. And then it slowed down. So it went back to the first theme and it slowed even slower than the initial bit. So the first bit was 68. This went back down to 60 or 62. And then it went back up to about 112. And so there's this feeling of going back and forth. It's not exactly halftime. It's a little bit more feeling than that. But what I wrote down for the theme one, there was a sense of blues. It wasn't really a full blues kind of feel to it. But for me, it had a little bit of that lamentation in it that you were talking about. Maybe a little bit more of a nostalgic feeling that
Mm-hmm.
was happening in that theme one. The second time through theme one, I was like, man, it's got a tuba going on in there. It's got some brass going on. And I was like, oh, interesting.
Bass trombone.
Oh,
Bass
bass
trombone.
trombone.
Big bass
Okay.
trombone. I do love that. Just a big splat. Wow. I love, yeah, one of the loudest bass trombones you'll hear in a song. Man, love it. Yes. Yeah, it kind of introduces the new section again. When it goes back, it's just like, wow, it's like the signal that, okay, we're going back to this gospel feel.
Well, the interesting thing to me about the second theme, and especially as it returned the second time, I started to write down the words New Orleans,
Mm-hmm.
which began to give maybe a slightly different feel to me because there are different types of celebrations in like New Orleans music. And one of them is actually in the context of a funeral.
Mm-hmm.
And so the funeral rites also are very peppy, right? It's like a
Mm-hmm.
celebration of life as a part of the grieving process.
Sure.
And I thought that given the lyrics, which I do want to go into, it was a very interesting juxtaposition between them. Because even in the happy time, what you were noting as the up-tempo areas, it did say, I can't help but thinking about you back when you were loving me. And
Mm-hmm.
so in some ways, there's that sense of wistfulness that happens even in these up-tempo sections. And one other thing that I wanted to note here was there was an interesting break going from the first kind of up-tempo section into the slow section in, trying to figure out, oh, how are you going to go from this brighter theme into the slower theme? There's literally a stop and then it starts
Right.
again. And is that something that you've heard before in other songs?
I think it calls a bit to, again, the difference in recording style. If you were to do this now, it'd be all in the digital workspace where you work. You would kind of map out the times. And I have a feeling I wouldn't like it as much because I like how you said the second time it goes down to the slower tempo, it's not quite the same. If you were mapping that out now ahead of time, you would go back to the same tempo because let's go back down to the slow tempo. You can manipulate it as such to have a more real feeling, but because that wasn't the case then, I have a feeling these musicians were live in the studio. I don't know, but it feels like because of that, where it was like, no, someone was just conducting and it was going by the feel of it, by how it felt, how fast should we go, how slow should it back down to, and everyone is so good. The band on this, Steve Cropper, Dean Parks, Leland Sklar, David Foster, Chuck Finley. Some of these names my music heads out there will know. Bigwigs that have played on hundreds and thousands of records. So definitely players that could really do it and really deal with the time changes without having to punch in a lot or just do the rhythm tracks, etc. I have a feeling this is probably all done in kind of a live in studio mostly, is my guess.
And it's so
Yeah.
well mixed, though, for something like that. I felt like nothing really overwhelmed, which I think is super hard to do, especially if you're talking about a more live scenario like this, where you're talking about lots of different, very loud instruments in the same room together. And I was just thinking about the mix and how It just seemed very natural. It seemed very well balanced. I would say that it was mixed with more foundation. So a really nice fat bottom. It had some really nice kind of like mid to low tones. Very different than I'd say your classic 1960s, even 1970s. Like I think if you hear some of the Tower of Power stuff that happening in the 1970s, it doesn't have the same kind of foundation as this particular song had. So, yeah, would love to hear some of your thoughts about the mix on this one.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it just sounds great. And now that I'm seeing it, I'm realizing that these people played on it. It's no surprise. And probably with his success, and by this time he was a staple in music and in entertainment. And someone who has a good record label, going to have a good support team, going to have great engineers. So it doesn't surprise me at all that it sounds so good and has held up over the years. It looks like it was on Rocket, which is, I believe, Elton John's label, which also doesn't surprise me that he appears on this album as well. So that makes sense.
Really interesting. So let's switch gears and talk a bit about the lyrics because there's a lot here. What do you see in the lyrics that you'd like to call out for us?
Mostly what we've already said, it works in the lyrics too. There's the reminiscent, and then it takes you to the place. Like, these are the things that you did, kind of when it moves to the gospel field. These are the ways in which you made life better. Things were better back then for us. So, yeah, I like that the lyrics represent the change again, reminiscing and then kind of going there.
I wanted to add to that a little bit because the verses are really easy to skip over, but I think it really sets the tone for the rest of the song. So thinking about verse 1, he's talking about a birthday and he talks in a way that really anchors us in time. There's this moment where it is a passing of some kind of thing that he remembers, which is this birthday, but he does refer to the fact that this person is in his past. And so there's that anchoring in the first verse. And then in the second verse, he talks about how he's still pining and longing for this person because he's talking about just like dust that's in a room. I'm still expecting that I'll see you very soon. And so there's a sense of like, hey, I'm just hanging out here waiting for you. And at the same time, he comes to this understanding, I should have known better than to know that you were going to come back.
Right.
And it was interesting because in the first verse, it ends that first verse of happier moments when you were loving me. So he's unhappy now and he was happier before. And in verse 2, is talking about like gone are the good times. So he's grieving those good times when you were loving me. And so the chorus then brings us into this interesting thing because he's talking about how this person has made him feel. But the last 3 lines were really interesting to me because this is where the twist is happening. You couldn't help me see of all the stuff that you've done for me, that there would be a time when I'd want to forget that you were loving me. And so there's a sense of it hurts so bad that I want to forget that you loved me.
How good
and
it was.
So, And so I just felt like there was this very deep sense of grief in all of these lyrics. And so when we got into the gospel segment, it's just like, okay, cool. You have dancing, you've got all the stuff that this person has done, has been like so happy. I can't help but think about you back when you were loving me. And that just adds to the sense of wistfulness, of loss that comes in, which I think maybe that's why I ended up in the New Orleans funeral grieving. Because in some ways it's like, I am only able to grieve by celebrating, which I felt like was a very particular cultural experience that maybe I don't personally understand, but was interesting for me to think through.
Yeah. I think the close are hitting on the lyrics. I'm pretty sure this marks the first song we've had that talks about hotcakes. So we've got that going for us.
Yeah, totally. So before we wrap up here, is there anything else that you want to add?
Yep, I think that's it. I mean, after hotcakes, nowhere else to go but there. Oh, you know where we can go after there? To the mailbag. To the mailbag. Go to the mailbag.
That's right, to the mailbag.
The mailbag. This is the place we really want to hear from you. Did we cover a song that is really near and dear to your heart? There's another version of it we should hear. Is there some information that's really cool or a cool anecdote you might have maybe about hearing this live sometime, or really actually maybe it's just a song that you've always hated and we made you hate it even more. Whatever it is, we'd like to hear from you. So how can people let us know their thoughts?
So definitely feel free to email us at themusiciansloop, that's LOUPE, at gmail.com. Or you can reach out to us via Instagram or Threads. That is The Musicians Loop. And speaking of Threads, this week's mailbag is sourced from Threads. It is from a user named Wolf Lanier from January of 2026. And the question is, how do you all feel about artists putting out multiple alternate versions of the same song? Because I personally love making multiple versions.
Oh man. Yeah, I love it. Well, it's probably the jazzer in me, right? Like one of the tenets of jazz music is the fact that there are the standard songs that are played, often largely coming from show, a Great American Songbook, classic songs. And so you go hear some jazz band play, trio, quartet, whatever, and they might do 10 songs and you've heard all of the songs before, but that's the magic, is this is a song that I know, but now I'm going to hear it in a way that I've never heard it before because these people are going to create it in the moment. So I think the essence of that variation, like, oh, I love this song and now you're going to do this other thing to it. Even back in most of my classical music listening, when I had to do that in school, I liked the theme and variations. Those are my favorites. Took me a while to realize, well, that's because I'm such a jazz fanatic. I like hearing the same thing, but then hearing the varieties of it. So yeah, I'll tend to like a particular version more than other, but I like when people put out alternate versions of the same song. Even like we just talked about with Neil Sedaka, 15 years later, had another hit with his same song with a totally different arrangement of it.
Yeah, I was just thinking about a band that I was introduced to, I don't know, 20 years ago called Moxie Fruvis, like Canadian indie band. And they did a couple of their songs in a couple of different ways. And one of them was called The King of Spain, which was this very fun kind of like pop thing. And then they did a grunge. It wasn't even a grunge version. It was just a really crunchy, dark version of it that I thought was absolutely hilarious on a live version of that. And so I think that there is something that is very magical about reinventing something that someone knows very, very well. And in the case of Moxie Fruvis, this was a band that had such a following that people would memorize the lyrics and sing along with the band. And so to hear a complete reinvention of this, I think, was probably something very magical for the audience.
I think this also creeps into when someone does remixes of a song. Maybe the band doesn't necessarily do it, but they approve, oh, yeah, you're going to do a remix. So the remixer through the artist or the label has access to the actual tracking, so you can take out a particular thing and reharmonize, etc. So, I mean, a lot of times, frankly, the artistic musical vision of that never satisfies me. It's like, oh man, they didn't have access. They just used the regular recording and they decided to put this other bass line while those chords are playing on the original and it doesn't match and these notes clash and my music brain just isn't happy with that kind of stuff. But when they can get in there and take out the things and recreate musically some hit song that you knew, I always like when that's done musically. Even if oftentimes I like the original better, I love just the creativity of the remixes. So when a remix is just, I'm going to speed it up a little bit and add 4 on the floor, well, that's not that creative to me. But if you completely re-sing them, total tangent, but Mariah Carey's biggest hits over the years have had remixes where instead of just taking the elements, it's just resung altogether. Remix is not even a good term for it. It's like a reinvention, a re-recording. Her lead vocal is new and different. The background singers are different. The remixer programs all different stuff for it, and they're these new magical creations. Love it, love it, love it.
I think you bring up a really interesting point having to do with covers. And I think that there are covers where the song is completely reinvented. And that is something that the purists will be angry about, but everyone else will be like, oh, my mind is now blown. I think also there is a sense of the artist reinventing themselves and reinventing their own work, which probably is more along the lines of what Mariah Carey is doing that you just mentioned, is reinventing her own songs in a different way that we haven't heard it before. Is that something that we have heard other people do as well?
Yeah, actually, another artist that'll probably make an appearance here someday. I'm just trying to decide which song to do. An artist named Benét,
Mm.
amazing singer, songwriter, and especially on his first album when he had the record label money to put out a CD single that had like 5 remixes instead of just the normal, oh, this one, again, it's just got a little different beat to it, but it's all the same. He had these drastically different. This might be a good candidate for the show notes. So maybe check out in the show notes. We can put some links to some differences here and hear the originals and hear the remixes, the alternate versions of the tunes. Always loved that. In the group Impact that I sang in for so long, a cappella group, well, we would run into the problem sometimes we would make a recording and on the album there'd be all these parts and then we would be faced with trying to cover live with just 5 people and no band. We would have 5 people trying to cover ourselves from our own album that we wanted to sing for people live. Sometimes it would just be whittling it down and getting the essence of it and then just, okay, well, that's as good as we can do. And there was one song at least where we just did a completely different version because there wasn't enough harmony parts and it needed a groove. So if we had one of the people doing vocal percussion, then we were missing a chord tone. If we had the chord tone, it didn't have the groove that we wanted. So instead of just doing a version of the song that we weren't happy with, we just rearranged it, did a completely different version. And people who knew the album, they recognized the song, recognized the lyrics. It was like the acoustic version. Obviously, even though we were a cappella, it was always acoustic. But, you know, if we were a regular band, this would have been the stripped down acoustic version of it that we had to do live. Anyway, we lived that a little bit in that group where we were trying to cover ourselves. So a lot of times we had to come up with alternate versions. And usually when the audience knew the original, it always got cool reactions. Like halfway through the first little part of the verse, you'd literally see the faces go, oh, this is that song. That was always fun.
I love thinking about these reinventions of songs. I also think just reflecting on the nature of a cappella, because for the most part, a lot of it is very scripted, because in order for people to have all of these voices singing together, you basically need to script almost everything. It is a lot harder to do in a cappella because you have to rememorize everything instead of doing it with instruments. And I feel like as an instrumentalist, that is one of the easiest things I can do. It's like, okay, we got a new arrangement. Cool. You know, between one week and another, we can completely pick up a new arrangement. And it is a lot harder to nail in a cappella.
Well, right, yeah, because you need to arrange who's singing what parts on the chords. If you have a solo guitar record, or you're a singer-songwriter and you play a certain set of chords that you sing, and then at the gig, you want to play different chords, you just decide to play different chords and then you can do it however you want.
But even with a band, right? It's a lot easier.
Yeah, even with the band. But yeah, like we can't just decide the night at the sound check, oh, tonight let's do this minor and then let's modulate up a third on the bridge where we normally just modulate up a half step. Okay, see you there tonight. Like you can't just say that and push some buttons and make it happen or strum some chords. You could do it and you could do it quickly if you're good at it, but it takes a minute to actually redo and assign parts. And that is something about that. That's harder
it is interesting
do.
to think about how things just are different in different types of media.
Yeah, we just had to figure out a way that would work for us, you know, adapt and survive.
Awesome. Well, any last thoughts before we close out today?
That's it. Hope you liked this song. Neil Sedaka passed away not too terribly long ago, and his passing made me think of this song. It made me think of the hits, but I just always loved this one.
Awesome. Well, thank you for bringing it to us, and best thoughts to Neil Sedaka's friends and family and those who remember him fondly.
If you were a Neil Sedaka fan, or you know someone who is, you want to send them this episode, or if any of the episodes strike you as there's a song or a topic that we cover, maybe even in the mailbag that we cover a topic maybe a friend of yours might be interested in, please pass it along. Spread the word, write your friends and let them know about this. Share these podcasts and help us grow the audience. Rate and review, please. We love the feedback. Appreciate it.
100%. And with that, we will see you next week.
See ya.
Nailed it.
Nailed it.
I should probably not do this while I'm pouring tea.
Oh, what's her name? Like the only pop star of the last like 5 years.
I can say this.
So I'm going to say that way better.
Remind me what hotcakes are.
Pancakes.
Oh, okay.